There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn-Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads Outdoors. It's a little chilly. It's going to get up to about 16, but much later in the afternoon. I don't have time then, so I'm doing it now. It's about plus 12, but I will persevere. And here's a blast from the past. Look at this. When was the last time you saw me do this? This is actually one of the brands that I used to get out of the vending machines in Japan, and they have it at my local supermarket. Go figure. So I've had a fabulous week, reading-wise and otherwise. I was a little sleepy-headed, I think, when I recorded my Friday Reads last week, because I didn't tell you some of the personal news. Kenji has a part-time job, thanks to my mum. My mum has hired him to be her official daily dog walker. So he's walking Charlie for money every day. Her previous dog walker, a good friend of hers, I think it's her next door neighbor, has had surgery and will be off for many months. So that just was a great coincidence. And Kenji loves dogs. I think Kenji loves Charlie more than he loves me. And certainly Charlie loves Kenji far more than he ever cared about me. I'm kidding. Kenji is such a dog person. He'd probably do well to take, there's some training you can get, and then you can charge like $25 an hour to walk dogs once you get the certificate, and he'd probably love it, but I don't think he'd want to do it in the winter or so. But for right now, it's giving him a little bit of, it's getting him out of the house, giving him a little bit of a job, a little bit of money, and everybody's happy. So that was a wonderful idea. And that was the one thing that I wanted to mention last week and forgot. I'm not sure if there's any news from this week. We've had a nice, relaxing week. I did have a biblio adventure, but for mysterious reasons, I'm going to keep that a mystery, at least another week. We're going out to the farm tomorrow. I'm filming this Thursday morning because we're going out to the farm Friday for the weekend. We're doing a lot of cleaning and sorting out of stuff there, and I'll be out there every couple of weeks for the rest of the spring and summer. And so that's why I am here today. That's it for personal news. Oh, editing, Sean. I just got back from the park. I realized I forgot one important thing. My mystery guest last week was the Saskatchewan writer Candace Kirkpatrick. And everybody, you all loved her if you saw her, but some of you probably haven't discovered her yet. So do go back. There'll be a link in this show notes under her book title. Her debut novel is Crows and Cheesecake, and it sounds like a wonderful book. She has a bunch of copies in her possession that she is willing to sell with free shipping. So just for the price of the book, I think it's $25. All those details will be in the show notes, but you have to have a Canadian address. It's too much of a fuss to send it to an international address, too expensive, blah, blah, blah. So this is only for Canadian viewers. I'm going to put her contact details and all that at the top of the show notes, okay? And it's a good deal. Free shipping, plus she will inscribe it to you personally. Not only sign it, but inscribe it to you if you so wish. So you can email her. So follow up. I can't wait to read it. And I think you should read it too. And you can get a special copy direct from the author. Oh, and did I mention in the last 1,000 videos that I have specially designed bookmarks for sale? Here's a picture of them. Getting rave reviews from the people who have purchased them or received them for free because they're upper tier Patreon members. I think you need a set for yourself. More information in the show notes. Uncharacteristically, I am going to comment on a literary prize, because just about an hour, maybe 2 hours ago, it was announced that this Canadian novel, this Newfoundland novel, The Adversary, by Michael Crummey, won the Dublin, is it called the Dublin Literary Prize? Something like that. And that is lovely, especially since I'm supposedly reading it. It's one of those ones that's been sitting there on my current reads, and I haven't picked it up in many months. Published in 2023, so I'm surprised it was even eligible in 2025, but maybe it was published somewhere else in the world in 2024. Doesn't matter. I started it, I'm doing it as an audio text combo, and I'm really enjoying it. Over about 4 months, I got to page 23, so it was during that time when I was just supposedly reading way too much stuff and not really getting to anything. And then I cut it way down to 15, and I'm just hovering at around 18 current reads now, so I haven't gotten to this forever. The fact that it's won this prestigious literary prize has piqued my interest to pick it up again and keep going, because it was starting out really good. Set in the early settler days of Newfoundland, I think that would have been the early 19th century. Might have even been earlier than that. I'm not very good on Newfoundland history. Michael Crummey. What a journey I'm sure he's had with a name like Crummey. I actually got a book signed from him in the mid-90s when I lived in Toronto. I was walking by the chapter store on, I forget which street it was, but in the downtown area. And there was a book signing, and I said, oh, I'll go. And he was sitting there at a table, and there was nobody around. And I bought the book just because and got it signed, and he was awkward. Maybe I was the only person who'd come to buy a book and get it signed that day. And the whole exchange lasted 7 seconds. Never read the book, don't remember what it was. Whatever would have just been coming out in the 1990s, I've been able to find that out. But I have since read 2 by him. Sweetland, which I loved, except the second half I got bored because it was such a Robinson Crusoe tale. And then The Innocents was his penultimate novel, and I loved that one. I think I have a full review of it. If I do, I'll link it in the show notes. And this one obviously has been quite well received as well. So go Michael Crummey. All right. For one of the very first times I've struggled with mystery guests not showing up, or like I had one, and I'm not going to name any names. Why would I ever do that? It's nothing personal. People are busy. But one was a no-show, and then I scrambled to find another one who was a little bit commitment phobic. So I have roped somebody in who I've wanted to have on my channel for a long time. And so not only did this mystery guest save my butt this particular week, but you're going to enjoy this. Make sure to check out all the books listed in the show notes, because this is a book-filled chat indeed. And this week's mystery guest is a dear friend of mine, Kathleen James-Cavan, who used to be my prof in the early 90s, and we have been friends ever since. She is one of those literary elite types that can put in her author bio. She divides her time between somewhere in Italy, she's going to tell us exactly where, and Saskatoon. So now she's joining us from Italy. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you, Shawn.
It's great to see you, and tell us where you are and why you're there.
Okay, so I am in a little place called Santa Domenica Talao, which is translated as Saint Sunday. Talao is the name of the river that runs, or Lao actually is the name of the river, Ta being the local dialect word for de or day. That's the meaning of the place. It's in the southern part of Italy. It's in Calabria. So we're south of Naples quite a bit. It's a tiny village, 1,200 people. We live in the Centro Storico, and we have the great fortune to have a garden. That means that somebody has to be here to look after the garden. For the time being, my husband and I are taking turns, 3 months here and 3 months back in Canada. My 3 months is coming to the end.
He's not there with you.
No, I'm alone, da sola.
You're having a holiday from your husband in Italy. That's wonderful. I didn't realize you were not together there. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So was this a long-term goal to have an Italian residence? And are you planning to end up there permanently at some point?
It's not a long-term goal. It was something that started to occur to us maybe 8-9 years ago when we first took a trip to Italy and Greece. And we also touched down in Austria for a bit of time with our daughters. We fell in love with Italy. We just loved the language, the culture, the food, even more than we loved Greece. And then when we got home, we started reading articles about the €1 houses, which are basically ruins. And you can buy them for €1, but you have to make them livable within 12 months, which is way beyond our power. So we started looking elsewhere. We just had this thought, could we live in Italy? Could we go there and spend extended time there? One thing led to another. We spent one summer learning Italian in a school. We did it again after COVID. We started looking for properties. And this little village had an American who was matching up people with houses for sale. He showed us this one after I said that I would really love to have a garden. And so here we are.
Great. And do you think that you will eventually retire there? That might be your home base permanently at some point.
It's not going to be 12 months of the year, I don't think, forever, but we would like to spend more than 3 months at a time here. Ideally, it would be 6 months and 6 months. We'll see. We have to apply for the visa and wait 3 years before we can apply. So it's a slow work in progress.
I'm pretty stupid, but I think I can guess which 6 months out of the year you would choose not to be in Saskatchewan.
You know what? We come back for Christmas.
Oh, Wow, okay. It's so fascinating, and I'm looking forward to being invited to come visit you someday.
You're always invited. Come see our little borgo and have gelato at Acchiazza.
Sounds wonderful. So now let's go further back in time. Tell us your version of how we met Kathy.
Okay.
What am I getting myself into here?
Aha. We first met when you were a student in my honors seminar in 18th century British literature. My first year of teaching, 1992, and it was a very large seminar. I think there were 16 anyway, large for a seminar anyway, and you were one of that group. That's how we met. You can tell the story of how you came to be better known to me. When I was fresh out of graduate school, right? So I really wanted to encourage students to read the texts in the ways that they most were comfortable and most wanted to explore. And I said, if you have a critical position or a critical view that you would like to examine these works through, please let me know and I'll see what I can do to support that.
And what did I say? I actually don't remember.
You said, I want to do queer theory.
Oh, okay. That sounds like something I would have said back then. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So that was great because I was all excited about that idea. There was a lot of interesting stuff being done in that field at that time in 18th century literatures. I was really intrigued by your interest. And I don't remember how much you dug into queer theory in the 18th century, but I think you
that
did
I
write
did.
at least one paper.
But
Yeah.
it's a little bit rough expression, but when gay men use it, it's not meant to be at all offensive. You were my fag hag professor, and I was your fag student. We really did take a shine to each other, and by the end of the class, we were friends. So that was wonderful.
I think we became friends after you graduated.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Over the years, I've lived various places in Canada, and Kathy had conferences in Toronto and Vancouver and stayed with me. It's been wonderful. Now that I've moved back to Saskatoon, Kathy decided to leave as much as possible so she doesn't have to see me too much.
That's right.
Tell the viewers more about what your areas of research are and or were.
Okay. Most of my career was working on literature by Jane Austen, literature by women in the 18th century, and I got into disability studies within the first 8 years of my career at the U of S. I began working in that field with respect to the 18th century because the time period saw the development of the medicalized body, especially with the professionalization of medical practitioners and the Royal Society's publications digging into bodily difference, whether through animals or humans. There was a huge amount of interest in the human body. It was also reflected in the literature, but not much explored by critics. It is now, but at the time when I started, it was a fledgling field. I did a little bit of publishing in that area, and of course in works on Jane Austen. My dissertation was on the incomplete novels by Jane Austen that she left when she died in 1817, and their completions by subsequent authors, including members of her family, and then authors up to the 1980s. Since my dissertation, which was finished in 1993, there have been just an enormous number of fan fiction publications and continuations. I haven't written much about those.
The next bit of this conversation is going to be one of the vintage kind of Shawn and Kathy discussions, because I'm going to make a really blunt statement that's overly generalized, and you're going to bring me down to reality. So I'm going to say, and were they all crap? All those finishing Austen's novels, weren't they all terrible?
What does terrible mean? Right? If you're a reader looking to have more Austen, yes, you'll be disappointed because there is only one Jane Austen, really. People can imitate Austen, but I'm not sure that there's a replication. And really, that wasn't the purpose of the authors who were writing, I don't think. Their purpose was to continue the stories and fill in the blanks, because when Austen died in 1817, she left this wonderful gem of a stem of a novel called Sanditon, or she called it The Brothers, and then it was called Sanditon by her sister. That novel has been famously or infamously finished on television screens a few years ago. The first authors of these continuations just wanted more. They wanted to finish the story or see where it would go. There's one completion of The Watsons, which takes place in Italy, actually. Not the whole thing, but there's a scene lots of interesting attempts to complete the stories. Sanditon was 12 chapters. The Watsons was a little shorter, but in both cases, she had set the stage for a story that could have continued. The Watsons was left incomplete probably between 1803 and 1805, more likely 1805. It's not clear why she stopped writing it, but it coincides with the time of her father's death and the family's removal from Bath and subsequent homelessness, essentially, for a few years until they landed in Chott and had their home there. But she kept the manuscripts, these fragments of stories, and took them with her wherever she went. I think that's really interesting that she didn't regard them as junk. There's some suggestion that she took some of the characters or a specific character from the Watsons and remolded her into Emma when she was writing Emma. That's lovely speculation. We don't really know. One of the things I was really fascinated by was how people finished. And what I was really interested in seeing was people's responses to their reading. So it was reader response theory being worked out on the page. So maybe not brilliant literature, some of it very entertaining, and some of it way over the top. One of my thoughts when I was doing that work was, when I retire, I'm going to write a continuation. But now that there have been so many, I don't think I'm going to.
I just had to say one word, Austen, and just let you go. That was incredible. There might be some more of Kathy's wisdom on Austen coming to my channel, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Is there a text, an 18th century text, that you would recommend to anybody who is interested that touches on in some way disability?
There are several. The first one that comes to mind is one that I edited. It's an essay by William Hay, who was an MP. He himself had a disability. He describes himself as a dwarf. He stood about 5 foot tall, and he had kyphosis, so he had the curvature of the spine. He wrote and published in 1743 to 1745 an essay called Deformity, an essay about how he experienced life at that time. He is of short stature. He has medical problems that come with kyphosis, and he also is a very active member of Parliament, part of Northumberland's crew, the Duke of Northumberland. He sits on all kinds of committees. He's very busy, but at the same time, he deals with not being able to see the king, for example. As he writes in his essay, when the king comes to open Parliament, because he's so short and gets crowded out, he feels excluded. Or he writes in a flirting way about ladies and not being able to see him at the dinner table for a roast of beef and so on. That would be a really good thing to read. It's not very long, but it gives you some indication of what the feelings and thoughts were of a person with a disability of that sort at that time. For a literary critical read, you might want to look at Frances Burney's Camilla, because there's a character called Eugenia in that text. And Eugenia gets smallpox, and it affects her body and her growth for the rest of her life. She's not the main character, but her experience and the responses that she receives from her parents, and particularly from her father, and from those around her and her uncle who feels responsible for her getting smallpox in the first place, that storyline is significant, and it will give you an idea of the attitudes to disability at the time.
Fascinating. I have read Evelina. Didn't I read that because you made me?
Yes, I made you read Evelina, yes.
I want to read it again. I really loved it.
Longer than Evelina.
It's a youngster, but I did really enjoy it. I happen to know you've got a literary project of your own happening. What do you care to tell us about that?
It's at a very preliminary stage. I'm looking at it right now as a piece of creative nonfiction. It's going to be based on my grandmother's diary, her 5-year diary from 1938 to 1942, 43. And it's about her experience becoming, what I want to focus on is her experience as the caretaker of my great uncle's house. He was a minister in the United Church and was called to a point in the Ottawa Valley. His wife had recently died. My grandmother, who was a teacher and looking after her own daughter, of course, at the same time, was a single parent, was asked by the family to go and become Uncle Herb's caregiver, look after the house, housekeeper. As you probably know, many people know that ministers generally are very busy looking after himself or herself. It is, especially in the 1930s and 40s, is a hard thing. So the idea was that he would need someone to run the house, get meals, be the host or hostess of the events that would be happening, the meetings in the house, and the various activities that went on in a country church, dinners and that sort of stuff. So Grandma was asked, and she said yes, which surprises me, really. That's one of the points in the, it's not a novel yet, but in the diary, because she had her own career. She was a very good teacher. She taught for more than 40 years. She had to put that aside to do this. So that's what it's about. I know what I want to happen in the book, but I'm not sure how to make it happen. That's the problem right now.
And I'm going to imagine that part of the fascination with this diary is that it's quite candid, is it?
Surprisingly, it's not.
Okay.
There are some indications of some candid conversations, about 3. And they're written in ironic prose. We had a very interesting underlined conversation. So what fascinates me about it, of course, it's wartime. It's like the beginning of war. For the first time in her life, my grandmother saw her brothers in army uniforms. The place where she moved to happened to be within 10 miles of Canada's largest army base. That's where they were sent for their initial training for some of the time. She's observing the war. She acquires a radio, which was not an easy thing to do, I think. It was expensive, but it was part of her belief in staying in touch with the world. She was very interested in what was going on. So she'll say things like, they're having a hard time in Europe. I washed my hair today. I love the juxtaposition of the banal and the events. She comments on the siege of Sebastopol, and then she talks about the crops. So it's fun to wade through that. And then for me, the difficulty is how to write it so that there's a voice that makes sense. And that's what I'm struggling with.
It sounds really fascinating. Did she live long enough that you had a relationship with her?
Yes, we had a very close relationship. She lived until she was 95.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
did she talk a lot about this part of her life that you have that plus the diary, or?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah, there was a lot she didn't talk about, but I can see some of the things she alluded to during the time that I knew her are in the diary, and expanded, particularly in a way that I can see why she didn't talk a lot about. Something else that really interests me about the diary is that she went to movies at least once a month, sometimes once a week. There's one note where she's invited to go to a movie for a second evening in the week. And she says to herself, I should not go to a movie twice in 1 week. A, because she's a teacher, and B, because she's the right-hand person at the manse. People might talk.
And we should say, just in passing, because we've got your reading choices to get to, but you are also a United Church minister. Are you retired?
Yes, I'm a retired United Church minister. My career in the church was short, but it continues in ways that are not connected to a pastoral charge. I served a pastoral charge, and I also taught at St. Andrew's College. I taught students who wanted to be ministers for about 4 years.
But my mother, she also is a retired United Church minister, and you are colleagues and friends. Lots of things overlapping in our lives. And you're also a big reader. Tell us about this great book club you're in. I love the idea of this one.
So this is a book club that arose during COVID. For some reason during COVID, the high school Facebook group, our alma mater, I guess, just took off. So I hopped on and saw all these people I hadn't met in ages and hadn't really known what had happened to them, because that was way back in Ontario, and our town, people didn't usually settle there after they finished high school. They went everywhere. Then we started talking about our English teachers and the kinds of things that we read. For example, in grade 12, we read The Mountain and the Valley by Ernest Buckler, which is quite an extensive book. It's not something that I would expect grade 12 students today to be reading. Maybe they do, and I just didn't know about that. But the grade 12 students that I've taught, when they come to university, they've never heard of that book. Grade 12 was Canadian literature, and that's what we started with. This small group of us thought, what if we read it again? So we formed a group and started reading The Mountain and the Valley together. And then we chatted online, as you and I are doing now. We thought, what should we read next? So we read As for Me in My House, because that was also on the syllabus for that year. And we just took off from there. Now, our friend, our sadly departed friend, Dan Walsh, was really the spark for all of this. He was an incredibly bookish person. When we spoke to him online, he was sitting in his library, which was most of his basement, full of books.
That sounds like it's me in embryo.
Very much like you, very much like you. And he was always reading and then always recommending things. The other people in the group are a writer from Calgary and a woman who lives now near Ottawa, who is an artist and a craftsperson and learning French. They're quite a group of interesting people. And we've added another person, another alumnus from our illustrious high school. So we knew each other vaguely in high school. I knew Judy, the writer, much better because we were in ballet classes together. I didn't know the other ones quite as well. So it's been lovely. We meet once a month and we choose a book, very eclectic kinds of things. We thought we would stick to Canadian literature, but we have branched out and done other things. But we tend to read Canadian. A few months ago, we read a work of American history, a memoir, which was something that I'd heard about. Nobody had any trouble with putting it on the list, and we had a good conversation about it.
That's a good segue into what books you'd like to recommend to us.
So I could start with that one.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure it's probably quite well known. It's called An Unfinished Love Story by Doris Kearns Goodwin. She was the biographer of Johnson, wrote about Roosevelt, she wrote about Lincoln, and is a well-known author, sports writer, and so on. I actually suggested it because of the recommendation that was given to me. But I thought to myself, it's going to be a slog. I'm not really interested in American history, but I was, because the book is fashioned from the letters and documents she and her husband collected over the years of their service in the White House and outside the White House as well. And it was really a fascinating read. And it was a page turner because of her writing style.
Yes, I've read Team of Rivals, which is about Lincoln and his cabinet. It was a page turner, just incredible. And then I read her one about Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt that was also very good.
You should read those then, because I enjoyed it. And I was reading it during the American election. It was very depressing to listen to the rhetoric during the election and then compare it to the kinds of care for the American people that this book highlighted for me. That's one. I was looking at my list and I thought, they're all kind of memoir-ish. I would also recommend Held by Anne Michaels, a recent book.
I'm glad you loved it. I didn't love it.
I loved it because I liked its fragments. I'm beginning to really enjoy fragmentary writing. And that was part of the mystery, figuring out who's who and who's connected to whom and how is this all working out. I enjoyed that.
Beautiful writing. I loved the first part. And then it just fell apart for me, but I'm not as into that stuff as you are. Lindy will be so happy to hear you say that you loved it.
And that one is All the Color in the World. It's by C.S. Richardson. And it's similar to Held in that it's extremely fragmented, although there is a clear narrative thread. The chapters are tiny, they're minuscule, but you can't read them quickly. I just loved it for its distillation of ideas and images and also narrative. We don't get gobs of description. We don't get gobs of anything. It's just very spare and beautiful writing. So I would recommend that one.
I think I know that C.S. Richardson is a Canadian writer, but beyond that, I didn't even know which gender that writer is.
I don't know either.
Okay, then we'll leave it.
I think male, but I'm not sure.
So few women use their initials, isn't that right? Compared to men.
I've never thought of it.
I haven't thought about it very much, so it's maybe one of my another stupid statement of mine, but I think that's right. J.K. Rowling is the obvious exception to that theory. But we don't talk about her on my channel.
I was going to say, I wanted to recommend Jennifer Robson's Our Darkest Night. I think I loved it most because it was set in Italy, but it was in northern Italy, which I don't know very well. It's set in the Second World War, focuses on the experience of Italian Jews through the main character. It's really gripping written and gives you a really good sense of the terror of being Jewish, running for your life and being hidden in a family's house. The reason I enjoyed it is that it is based on the stories in Jennifer Robson's husband's family. They are from that area of Italy where the book is set. During the Second World War, her husband's grandfather hid Jewish families who were being hunted by the Nazis. And in it, there's also reflection and experience of the fascist period in Italy. It's very well historically researched. Jennifer's father was a professor of history where I studied in my first degree. So she has a strong background in history. And the other one, I have two more.
Two more.
The Hair with Amber Eyes. I think you were the one who told me about it, or I read about it on a blog that you wrote.
Yeah, I've never read it, but I had it on my shelf in Japan. I didn't keep it because I had to make some heavy decisions about how much money I was going to spend shipping books across the pond. But yes, I'm familiar with it.
Also, not completely set in the Jewish experience in Austria of World War II, but it ends up there. It's a memoir, but through these little, how do you say that word for the thing that?
Is it Netsuke?
Yes, thank you, because I can't say it properly. So
think
the
I've-
author is recounting a collection in his family and is writing about his own experience of these pieces, and then writes the history of the family going back to the 17th century, how they come into the family's possession, where they go, who keeps them, who passes them on, and under what terrible conditions. The part of the memoir that really affected me was the experience of the Anschluss in Vienna as the Nazis take over the government and start deporting the Jews from all over the country. But that's where their family winds up as deportees. Quite a good read. The beginning part is a bit turgid. It's a little bit too much technical information about ceramics that didn't really interest me, but it was worth it getting through for that. And what I'm reading right now is Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables. I approve of that choice. And I'm sure it's not your first time.
No, and that's what's so fascinating about it. I can remember a lot of it. Now, it's become part of popular culture, so who can't remember? I read it first when I was 10, and I remember it very well because we were traveling across Canada from the Ottawa Valley to the Maritimes, and we were going to visit the house, the Anne of Green Gables house in Cavendish, PEI. That was one of the things we were going to do among the many other things. I was given this book to read, and I just wouldn't take my eyes off it. I couldn't do anything else. Anyway, but this time through, I'm laughing out loud at it. It's hilarious. I'm planning to read all of the Anne books that I can find on Kobo.
When you come back to Saskatoon, which I think is happening in the next few weeks, you and Mom will have to have a conflab on Lucy Maud Montgomery because she is a big aficionado.
Oh, she's quite fascinating. And I think she certainly had a resurgence in literary circles for quite some number of years. I had a student who wrote on Emily of New Moon and disability in that work. She's now a professor at the University of Saskatchewan. It's people that have taken her seriously, finally, say for the last 20 years. But before that, she was ignored, I think.
I believe she spent part of her childhood in Saskatchewan.
She spent 1 year.
1 year. And her dad homesteaded here.
Yes, he moved when her mother died. She was less than 2. Her father couldn't look after her by himself. So she was raised by her grandparents. She saw him until she was about 7, and then he moved to Prince Albert in the Northwest Territories, as it was then. I think that would have been like 1870 or something. He remarried, and then when she finished her high school, she went out to Prince Albert to live with her father and stepmother, but it didn't last. She didn't get on with her stepmother and went back to PEI, which she loved. I can remember Most of her adult life was lived in Leaskdale, which is near Uxbridge in Uxbridge County, Ontario. We used to drive past her home there every time we went to visit my husband's family when we lived in Peterborough. And I often thought to myself, I should stop in and have a look. But there's just a plaque there as far as I can remember. She lived several years with her husband, who was a Presbyterian minister there.
God, we could go on for another 2 hours, but what a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being my mystery guest. And I'm looking forward to seeing you face to face. And maybe I'm going to rope you into doing a once a year or twice a year, whatever it works out to be, to just let you talk about whatever kind of literary stuff you want, because I know that I would love that. Thank you so much.
Sounds lovely. Thank you.
Yes, I'm so glad that you have finally met Kathy. I've mentioned her several times. She is, as I described there, former prof, good friend, and also a patron. We have lots of connections. I hope she will agree to have an ongoing occasional series about what she's been reading, because I could listen to her talk about books for days on end. I managed to get one video edited this week, and that was one I'm very proud of. It is a author interview with Marion Agnew, who lives in Northern Ontario, just beside Lake Superior, near Thunder Bay. And her novel, Making Up the Gods, I read over the course of a year from 2024 to 2025, and it is one of the best novels I've read in recent years. Just such a, you can see what I titled the video, lusciously quiet, character-driven novel. This is one where if you tend to hew to my reading tastes, you must get it, because it's such a Shawn book. If Shawn-Books are your bag, this is one for you. We had a lovely chat. Please check it out. I finished one book, started two, I'm going to start another one. The one that I've finished is one that I read to Mum, and this was an absolute, complete and utter delight. A 1955 novel from the UK, an episode of Sparrows by Rumer Godden. And this, too, was such a Shawn book. This was a Book of the Month Club copy that probably my grandma Mooney, not my grandpa Mooney, I'm guessing, but I don't know. It was in their library, and I brought it from the farm last summer. And Mum and I just adored it. It was marketed upon publication as a novel for adults, and it certainly in many ways is a novel for adults. There's touches on themes of bad mothers and prostitution and some heavy subjects adjacent to the main story. But it's about a poor girl on a poor street in London in the early post-war period, where the church down the road has been bombed and the airplane's still sticking out of it. So it's early post-war Britain in London. And our protagonist is I think a 9-year-old girl, dirt poor, and her mother has left her boarding with this other married couple. She only comes back once in a blue moon. She's not very reliable. So the girl is Lovejoy, and Lovejoy gets it into her head that she wants to grow a garden, but there's no place to grow a garden on this busy, dirty street. And so she finds a place in the ruins of the church or some other bombed out buildings. And because of the bomb, the earth is kind of dug up and she can plant, but that's discovered by a bunch of boys and destroyed. And so one of the boys feels guilty about destroying her garden. He's one of the other main characters. His name is Tip, and he helps her find another place. And so it's all about how is she going to afford to buy seeds and garden tools. I meant to look up if Rumer Godden was Catholic. So many writers at that period of British literature did convert to Catholicism. Editing Sean here. Well, I did finally check, and yes, Rumer Godden converted to Catholicism later in life. According to Google, some people claim she converted to Catholicism in 1957, 2 years after this book was published. Others say it wasn't until 1968. The Catholic Church is nearby, and there is anti-Catholic prejudice in the adults that the children don't share, and there's a bunch of stuff that was really interesting. Lots about poverty, and they dig up dirt from the more well-to-do area just across the street or down the block. And the gardening committee there discovers that the sod has been stolen and they're all put out. There's two elderly spinster women that are almost like, they're not narrators, but their commentary is important, and they do in brief but important ways show up as characters in the novel. Olivia and Angela. Angela is a stern do-gooder, active on 700 committees and this and that and this and that, as well as working. And her sister Olivia is a bit slow, never done anything really, and she's got a big heart. And so I realize that as I'm describing it, that it in many ways does read as a children's novel, but such a full-bodied, wonderful, heartwarming, not sentimental. That's I always say with books I love, very emotional but not sentimental. And this is definitely one of those that just won me over. It's been made into a movie. I can't remember the title. It's a different title. I'm going to put that on the screen. Mom and I are going to watch it as soon as possible because this was a big hit. Oh, and I see that the Rumer Godden is her maiden name, but she married and became Mrs. Haynes Dixon in private life. On the back here it says, lives with her husband and 2 daughters in Whiteleaf in the cherry orchard country of Buckinghamshire. Anyway, if you like middle grade novels, you'd love it. If you like adult novels about children, or if you're the kind of person, because I have long had an allergy to children protagonists in adult fiction, so often there's something cloying about it, and that is not the case here. So I really recommend it. Enough said. What a delight. Mom and I will be reading much more of Rumer Godden's output. So that's what I finished. I have started 2. I have started a new buddy read because I bailed on the massive praiseworthy buddy read that I started to do with Joe Smith and Heidi. So Heidi and I have started another one that we wanted to read anyway, and that is the second volume, if you can call it a series of memoirs. This is the second one by Sharon Butala, Where I Live Now, A Journey Through Love and Loss to Healing and Hope. And every time I read that subtitle out, I just get a cringe. I don't think Sharon picked that subtitle. I'll be eat crow if she did, but it doesn't sound like her. Heidi and I have checked in on part 1, and we're both smitten. It, in a way, it picks up where her first memoir, The Perfection of the Morning, left off. In some interesting ways, it treads some of the same ground without repeating anything. It doesn't feel like, oh, I read all this before. No, it's not like that. It opens with her leaving the farm where she and her husband, Peter, lived their 30-plus year married life after his death. And she moves to Calgary. She came to the farm as a city girl, not knowing a thing about ranching and farming. And then 33 years later, I think it was, she goes back to a city with a Western Canadian country sensibility running through her veins. And it's about that transition. I actually don't know how far it goes into setting up a new life in Calgary because I'm only at the beginning of the book. But it's just sumptuous. Oh my God. There's something, I almost hesitate to say this. Heidi agreed with me, but I'm going to say it's more shapely than The Perfection of the Morning. But I didn't think that The Perfection of the Morning was shapeless. That's not what I mean. But there's something about the scenes that she's setting here that I'm really digging it. And one thing that's touched me already is everything was basically packed up. She had just enough to stay in the house 2 or 3 more days by herself before she was going to get in the car and drive to Calgary and start a new life. And during those last few days, animals started wandering into the yard, and 2 owls sat in a tree. That kind of wildlife that never came into the yard, but they just sensed that this place that had been a place where humans had control, that it was going back to, it was being rewilded, and they just started coming in. And she had, as only Sharon Butala can describe it, mystical experiences showed up in her dreams and stuff. Oh, just wonderful. Really enjoying this so far. And Sharon has a third memoir. I think some of the other books she's published might also count as memoirs, so not overly attached to the ordinal numbers here. But her latest memoir, let's put it that way, is coming out in September. And looking forward to reading that. And because I finished an episode of Sparrows with Mom, I immediately started this one that I'd been dying to get to with a former mystery guest. This is a Saskatchewan novel called Small Reckonings by Karin, Melberg, Schwier, and she was my mystery guest back in the day. I'll put a link to that. This is the 3rd edition, 2023. She revised the first one, so I made sure to get the one that's up to date. It's been really lauded. It's Karin's first novel, and it won all kinds of Western Canadian book prizes. No, not just Canadian-wide. Glengarry Book Awards shortlist as well. And so I've started reading it to Mum. Whereas there was some humor as well as poignancy to the Rumer Godden book, this one I think is going to be a tougher story. It's set on the Canadian prairie. One of the main characters is William, and he's a New Zealander who moves to Canada and starts homesteading in Saskatchewan. He meets his future wife in Toronto, and then they homestead together. And their daughter, this is not anything I've gotten to yet, early chapters, but the central thing in their married life is that they raise a daughter who at the time would have been called feeble-minded and today would have been called something much more politically correct, developmentally delayed or something. I'm not sure what the modern parlance would be. And unfortunately, some tragedy befalls that daughter, Violet. The second daughter, according to the back. I deleted something that I said that isn't on the back cover, so you'll have to read the book to find out. But I am really enjoying it so far. The writing is lovely, and I don't have much else to say about it. I'm really enjoying it. Stay tuned. But I read the first chapter to Mom 2 days ago, and then Mom took Kenji and I to Costco, which was a big event. And we were in line at the cashier, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and it was Karin, Melberg, Schwier, her family, right behind us. So I said, I just started reading your book today to my mom. Quite a lovely little chat. Kenji couldn't believe it. He comes from Tokyo, where that kind of stuff never happens. Anyhow, so that's in progress. My Patreon book club, and if you're interested in joining Patreon so that you can take part, our next book club reading is at about a month from today, June 21st, I have in my head, but I'm not sure. It's something like that. And so it's time for me to start reading the next book club pick. We did a poll about a year or longer ago, and we chose about 4 books. The 4 books that got the most votes is what we've been reading ever since. And this is the last one on that list. During the Reign of the Queen of Persia by Joan Chase. I was vaguely aware of the title, but didn't know anything about it. And I heard One Bright Book, the podcast that Dorian Stuber and 2 bookish women, whose names I don't have in my head, they are the co-hosts of, and they did an episode on During the Reign of the Queen of Persia. And their discussion was so fabulous that at the halfway point, I stopped it and said, I have to read this book. And now I finally am. It is 3 generations of women in middle America. Might be even on a farm, which is another draw for me. So I'll have some preliminary thoughts on that, hopefully next week, but if not, soon thereafter. Oh, and don't you like my blouse? This was only $20 online. I didn't feel like I had enough summer blouses. I'm debuting it today. And that is what I have to say for myself. If you have anything to say for yourself, comment below. Thanks for watching.